Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Kerry Philips. I'm Head of Data Governance at Penguin Random House. So I look forward to speaking to you and telling my story of how we've worked together with Sifflet over the past 18 months. So at PRH, we're in the business of storytelling. Every year we sell thousands of publications across multiple authors, both established and new authors as well. We distribute over 100 different imprints to countries all across the world, and our mission is simple. We publish books for everyone because a book can change anyone, and that is at the heart of our mantra. So how does the world of books relate to the world of data? Something I'm asked quite often. Behind every story written, there's another story running silently in the background, and that's the story of our data. Data fuels how we forecast demand, how we manage royalties, as just a couple of examples of data within our business. Without trusting any of that data, the entire organisation and publishing machine slows down. A hands up for any of you who've been delayed because of a critical decision because no one trusted the numbers in a dashboard. Phew, some hands up. I'm in good company. So, like every organisation, we rely on that data for trust and buy-in from our key directors and stakeholders. But let me paint you this picture of a fragmented story, because data, like any story, needs structure, consistency, and accuracy. Imagine a world where a novel had missing characters, unfinished chapters, and so on. And I apologise for the volume of storytelling analogies here, but hopefully you'll stay with me. You would soon lose trust in that story, and it's the same for data. We had a situation where we had manual tests happening, we relied on engineers coding their own checks, and we had various inconsistencies across the data platform. The sheer volume of checks meant that we were heavily reliant on each engineer documenting how they were approaching their view of monitoring, so things like freshness, volume, and consistency across our data. And as we know, people have different approaches, so even if they all achieve the same goal, we were inconsistently monitoring the way we would track and highlight issues with health in our data. There was no consistency. So the errors spotting slowed development down and lacked consistency, and there was no centralised consumable view of alerts. So we had no way of being able to surface in one place where all of these errors were happening. And where we could share those messages, it wasn't necessarily comprehensive, we couldn't paint a full picture, and we were thinking about how we could establish the downstream failures. So does this sound familiar to anyone? Engineers tied up in testing instead of building, and business teams left with questions and chasing answers rather than decision making. Good. Well, that's exactly where we were. The best intent was there. We were operating at scale, but in a way that didn't scale. We were relying on the relationship between data owners, data stewards, and our engineers in order to put best practice in. But actually what we found was that it was very inconsistent in being able to demonstrate that. We've also started as an organisation to embed data as products. So again, being able to understand with business ownership how we could give the product owner a view on their product health overall was difficult because, as I mentioned previously, it was inconsistent how we approach monitoring at scale and our engineering's approach to coding that as well. So that became difficult. We needed a new approach to be able to oversee what was coming up, what was being processed through our platforms, and we needed something that included and empowered our business colleagues and data owners. As well as that, we spent time and months overseeing things like Power BI dashboards to try and present to the business a view of our data quality. So looking at rules like freshness, for example, to say when data had landed on time, but it was all pulled through a visualized dashboard that, although was useful, it only really helped us highlight one thing, and its most useful outcome was that we needed an approach to combine consistency, visibility, accuracy, along with speed and scalability. So thinking about that, we were able to catch freshness issues, volume drops, schema changes, but they really lacked context. They only covered whether the data had landed end to end. It didn't allow us to talk to the business about the real quality issues they were having. Yes, the data was there, but it really did lack the context. And engineers were spending huge amounts of time focused on maintaining tests instead of spending time innovating with data teams. We knew this wasn't sustainable for a published organisation of our size and our data team. So that hopefully helps give you an idea of where we've been on the last kind of 12 to 18 months. Prior to that, we were in a position of having some great engineers, engaged business users, and those wanting to do great things with data. However, it was very difficult, as we said, around the inconsistencies, the lack of centralised consumable view to be able to do all of that. So the turning point, a new approach for us. We needed a new approach to see coming through our platform. We needed to think about how we could deploy automated data quality monitoring, moving from months to days. We knew that ultimately manual rules is very time consuming. Trace level issues end to end with lineage. So those two alone were reason for us to think about having an observability tool. And we chose Sifflet because it was the one for us that was the most innovative. And just, I would do myself a disservice. I didn't mention that Sifflet is French for whistle. That's something I have to mention in every presentation. Whistle if there's a problem. And I think the simplicity of the tool allows us to implement both the most basic of monitors, so freshness volume checks, through to the more complex data quality ones. And working with Sifflet, we were able to trace those issues end to end. So who doesn't want, on top of being able to see freshness, where that matches with our lineage, which is also super important. And onto the automation of data quality checks, starting to encouraging our engineers to build monitor as code. So we were able to reuse and build in best practice for engineers as well as our data teams. So the final part of this, with what we were able to do, is start to talk to our business more, because freshness and volume and the basic kind of data quality checks isn't enough. We needed to go further. Encoding our own business logic, so for example, things like every book needing a named author and a retail price within a table or field with our data, seemed common sense, but Sifflet has allowed us to really surface where we may have gaps in things like our critical data elements. And I will just take a minute to say that these things have taken time to embed with the business. It's a real change process. So things like having one place for our engineers and our data community to really talk about these things started to come to life with Sifflet. And we were very much able to show the business the health of their products and the lineage, as well as start to have the conversations around data quality and encoding the logic as well. So think about your own business rules. What's your missing ISBN, or what's your missing critical data element? This is a great place to start, talking to the business around what their pain points are. What are they missing? If we turned all the lights off in your organisation, which are the ones you turn on first? So which are the most essential? And this was promoted a really open conversation around trust as a concept within our business and transparency. And hold on to that, because observability is not just around orchestration of data, but the quality is around promoting that trust, and data governance plays a key part of that. So I've spoken to you about where we've been, what we started to do with Sifflet, and very much how that started to have a joint up picture. We now had this workspace with everyone being able to see what was happening and the health of our products, and the impact was immediate. We started to ingest our data into Sifflet. We started to implement our initial freshness monitors, and we were able to already increase confidence straight away. So the way we did that was to work with business users, data owners, stewards, to implement those existing checks. So going right the way back to where we were talking about that scale without scale, we implemented those freshness checks into Sifflet. We started with what people were familiar with, because data is not just about being technical, it's about change. And change for us meant showing them what they were familiar with to start with. And the initial freshness monitors were there very quickly, something to able to give the business to review. But it wasn't always easy. I won't lie and say we just turned it on and it worked straight away and all of a sudden our monitors magically helped everything. We've had to go on a journey with this. And whilst it was quick, it was hard to adjust the observability processes. So, for example, having incident management processes, I'm sure all good data teams have, meant that we already had existing processes around how we'd interact with the business. And it took time to move from removing the manual checks to encouraging our engineers to move to Sifflet. And that's been done through various ways, such as our test engineer working directly with engineers, weekly sessions, looking at the health every day of Sifflet, understanding whereabouts we are with that process, and engineers that still want to code ultimately. So working with those kind of existing thoughts and processes. It's a constant learning process, but it's a journey that we're on, and I'm not here to paint a perfect picture. We are still on that journey, but ultimately understanding what already existed and building that into Sifflet has been hugely helpful for us. And in terms of our product teams, our data and business teams, again, it's been the same, where we've worked to understand their requirements. We've given them what they understood around freshness, has their data landed, but also now we've started to say, hey, you've got some confidence in Sifflet, you've seen that it can do consistency, freshness, but now let's talk about some of your pain points. So that very much helped us understand where we could help them. So business impact, publishing with confidence. It's really, as I said, been a selection of small wins along the way. We are very much comfortable about being on a journey, and we are changing the culture of trust. So this first one around real-time alerts, we've gone from data stewards or analysts having to come in every day and manually check on their data being accurate. For example, fields being as expected and not over those numbers, to actually being alerted on teams. So again, thinking about the amount of time given back to them is hugely powerful, both as a benefit for time and efficiency, but also as a kind of business benefit of getting time back for those colleagues. And Teams has been hugely helpful for us to be able to surface those issues. We, across multiple different projects, we're able to show people like what's happening on a real-time basis. So as I said, this is a slow change. We're not in a hurry to get to the end result. We're kind of learning as we go through iteratively. We're focusing on those daily operability, observability checks, and now we're only just starting to move into quality. So that culture has really started to build through those real-time alerts. Cutting that resolution time for hours to minutes has been showcased. So Sifflet has some excellent showcase, sorry, I think I'm cutting that a bit, has some excellent dashboarding with inside it, and that's been hugely helpful, being able to show users where they maybe think there are perceived problems, they may ask for certain criteria or quality rules written, and we're able to say, well, actually, in the past 3-4 months, that hasn't happened. So again, we're challenging that perception of what data quality truly is as part of that concept of trust. So in terms of that time reduction, my question for you to think about today is, and I'll be around on the Sifflet stand afterwards, if your team could cut down incident resolutions from hours to minutes, what would you do with that time? We're still very much on that journey. Things still take time. We haven't moved everything over just yet, but it definitely has improved our time available for engineers and cut that resolution time. We're also strengthening our business data team collaboration through having this visibility, having a shared platform, and being able to have these open conversations. Whereas previously we were stuck to having tests in multiple places, we now have one joint up picture, and we are making data quality visible for our stewards and our stakeholders. It's not just about enabling better, faster, more confident decisions, it's about how we treat trust as a KPI. So I've rushed through all of that. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but I'll just kind of wrap up on my part of the journey. I hope you found this insightful. As I say, we are on a journey. I think going from having those kind of brittle early tests to having one place where we've captured everything now has been hugely beneficial for Penguin. We know that every good story needs a narrator, and for us that's data governance, working hard to build quality across the organisation. And working with Sifflet has really helped turn data quality from a bottleneck to a strategic enabler. We're much more able to have more honest conversations around what the quality of the data means and how we can support business users with that. So just to finish on these kind of 3 key takeaways. Encode business logic as code. So as I said, think about what your business users are really looking for. What are their pain points? What's causing them time and effort that we might be able to help with through Sifflet? And those examples of thinking about your analysts or your stewards that are coming in and spending long amounts of time looking at errors in the data. Sifflet can do that in minutes and real-time alerts through Teams, and that's been a huge win for us. Making data quality visible. So this is about moving. Data quality is everywhere on LinkedIn around AI, but actually surfacing it, making it visible, moving it from the narrative to the data-driven facts is kind of where we want to be. And making it visible means ensuring that our owners and our stewards have access to be able to see the health of their data. And finally, treating trust as a KPI. Trust should be part of your everyday KPI metrics. Thinking about how you move trust or your quality score from one end to the other on what it takes to do that is hugely important. Thinking about how you can take rules that are there currently, perhaps things like my example of a data steward checking every day and actually knowing what level of quality you have and how you can improve that. Sifflet really helps demonstrate that in one place. So hopefully those are kind of my 3 key takeaways of thinking about how data deserves to be trusted. It's not enough to be data driven, you need to trust in the data as well. Because only when you trust your data you can bring real confidence to your story and bring your story to life. So whilst we're at Big Data London, think about what your next story around trust will be. Think about how some of these may impact you and what you would do with that extra time. So thank you very much for listening.